Every Stasis class has a specialty, whether it's freeze or slow or shatters. But as a hunter, have you ever wanted to steal everyone else's specialty and shove it all into one ability for yourself? Well, Mask of Fealty is perfect for you. It will turn you into the ultimate ice ninja. I'm Engineer. Our exotic that we're focusing on is one of the new Stasis exotics launched in Revenant called Mask of Fealty. This requires the final shape expansion, and you can only obtain it from Rahul's precision focusing. You have to reset his reputation at least once during the current episode in order to obtain it. This exotic, as you can see here from the detailed description from the Destiny data compendium, does not have a lot to it, but it is surprisingly deep once you get into it. It's going to modify our Withering Blade, also known as the Stasis Shuriken, and make it so that on hits and bounces on enemies or physical objects, it creates a small stasis crystal. And when it hits enemies, it'll give you 7.5% fixed melee ability energy. And then when it shatters either a stasis crystal or a frozen enemy, it's going to release a spread of 3 more stasis shurikens. Now the frozen enemy portion is a little bit bugged right now, but hopefully that will be fixed soon. But overall, this gives you a lot, just based on those stasis crystals, which will cause some direct freezes. As for stat priorities, you really can't go too wrong here. Every stat's a little bit good on this, because we're going to be using a bit of resilience, good bit of discipline, mobility, recovery, strength, all that. Intellect's probably the thing you need the least in this, but you really can't go too wrong in this, as long as you're getting a pretty good stat roll. Now, a few of the benefits of this exotic. You're getting some excellent crowd control. Stasis crystals will freeze a lot of things. You get a lot more uptime on your melee ability, and you're adding a lot of damage to what was one of the weakest melee abilities. You can see in some gameplay here, you throw it, it hits one enemy, you shatter it with either shooting it or more shurikens, and it scatters out damage to tons of enemies and slowing them. And as you add more slow in the mix and the stasis shurikens add more slow, you're freezing more enemies. It's just a chain reaction that's great at clearing huge groups of enemies. Now, I want to go ahead and get into the abilities. Most of your abilities on Stasis are fixed, but the biggest thing here that can vary up is your grenade. It's pretty flexible, but I like the Glacier Grenade because that gives you good shatter damage. Gambler's Dodge is absolutely required on this because we use it to get our melee charge back whenever possible. It actually gives you 130% of a melee charge, which is great because our Withering Blade has 2 charges by default all the time. Now throughout this video, I'm going to go over 2 build variants. One that's more dodge focused, where you're up close to enemies, so you can keep using that Gambler's Dodge to get your melee back. And then the other variant is more melee regeneration focused, and that's better for ranged combat. So you can hang back some, maybe playing that harder content a little bit, but generally be safer and just keep throwing those stasis shurikens out there. So our first aspect is Grim Harvest. This has 3 fragment slots, which is fantastic, but it really is the engine that our build works off of. This allows you to spawn stasis shards whenever you're slowing enemies, which we will do a lot, especially with our Withering Blades. The stasis shards naturally restore a small amount of health and melee energy, which is great, as we're very melee focused in this. Lastly, Grim Harvest lets these stasis shards give you frost armor, which is a new stasis verb that was added in the final shape that gives you damage resistance. So briefly, just to highlight everything involved with stasis shards, you can see a detailed description of everything they have. They last for a good amount of time, and they're generated for the entire team. It's not just you. It can also supply your teammates if they're using any of this. Small stasis shards give you 10% melee energy. This is affected by the flat gain penalty, but we don't take too much of a penalty on Withering Blade because it has a pretty fast cooldown. And as mentioned before, when you have Grim Harvest, you get 10 HP back for each small stasis shard and 1 stack of frost armor. Now for frost armor, what that does is it gives you 4.5% damage resistance per stack, up to 22.5% at 5 charges, which is the baseline, and that will last for 9 seconds. But if you take Whisper of Rhyme, then you can up that to 8 charges and 13 seconds, and that gets you up to 36% damage resistance. And this is extremely easy to maintain, especially on a build like this that makes so many stasis shards. So it's basically like having a whole nother 100 resilience at all times. Now for our second aspect, this is where the build kind of starts to diverge. So if you are focused on the dodge recharging side of it, we absolutely want Winter's Shroud. It creates a slowing field around you whenever you do your dodge, but it also will give you additional class ability energy for 3 seconds every time you slow an enemy, which we are doing constantly. So that will keep your dodge coming back all the time. Now, if we are going for the more long-range approach, we're not really going to be able to proc that as much. So then what we do is we take Touch of Winter, which upgrades our grenade. For Glacier Grenade specifically, this gives us an extra Stasis Crystal, and it puts them in a more circular focus, which is much better for boss damage. So it's just about getting more damage. Now I'm going to talk about the Fragments real quick. So once again, these are a bit different depending on the builds, but a lot of it is the same. First of all, you want to have Whisper of Rime because that gets your Frost Armor to the max stacks. You want Whisper of Conduction because that makes your Stasis Shards track back to you, so you don't have to go pick them up. Whisper of Rending is extremely recommended because it makes shattering those Stasis Crystals much easier, and you can do it in a single shot with most semi-automatic weapons. The other fragment that I'd recommend on this build no matter what is Whisper of Fissures because it makes your crystal shatters or frozen enemy shatters much bigger, and that's just going to boost your damage throughout, and we're doing a lot of that in this. Now the last fragment, if you're doing the close-up build, that I recommend is Whisper of Hedrons because that gives you plus 60 mobility, plus 60 resilience, and plus 60 recovery every time you freeze an enemy for 11 seconds. And that's fantastic. That's just a lot of stats. If for some reason you don't feel like you need this and you're getting your dodge back plenty fine, Whisper of Refraction is great because it gives you extra class ability regen back. Now as for the range fragments, once again, very similar, but after we get through Fissures, we're going to add in Whisper of Hunger. And what that does is it makes Stasis Shards give you even more melee energy, about 75% more. So that's pretty significant. The downside of this is it will drop your strength by 20, which makes it a little bit harder to work your stats. Alternatively, you can do Whisper of Bonds, which will make extra orbs every time you freeze an enemy, although there is a 10-second cooldown. But that's another good way to get melee energy back. You just have to go and collect the orbs or use a shoot to loot weapon. The mods are going to be a little bit different depending on which build you're using, whether it's the close-up dodge-based build or the ranged strength and melee regeneration build. But there's a lot of common things here. Making heavy ammo is always good on your helmet. Getting orbs from weapon kills is always good on your helmet. Getting super energy back from your melee kills makes a lot of sense in this. On our arms, it's going to be a little bit different, but we want to make orbs with our melee kills as well. If we're doing a dodge-based build, we want to take those melee damage instances and get class ability energy back with Focusing Strike. But if we're doing a more melee-centered build, we may want to take a Font of Vigor to get more strength, and also get some melee energy back from Momentum Transfer when we do grenade damage to get some more melee energy. Chest armor is always damage resistances, just what it is right now. On the legs, you can either go fully orbs in the close-up build to get your ability energy back, or really in either build you can do this, but you can also go stasis weapon surges. In either build, I'd recommend recuperation so that an orb heals you because we don't have a lot of sources of healing in this build. Finally, on the class item, utility kickstart's great in the dodge focused build. Powerful attraction is always great to get those orbs back. But if you're doing the more melee recharge focused build, then we're going to be using time dilation to keep those stasis surges running, and maybe using a font of restoration just to get more stats, because we're going to be trying to get as many stats as possible. So once again, a bit different here, but some commonalities. You always want to get 10 resilience. You want to get as much discipline as you can manage. We still want to try and hit at least 30 intellect just so we don't take a penalty. On the dodge based build, we want to get recovery and mobility up to at least 40. So when we get the plus 60 from Whisper of Hedrons, we end up at 100, which would be fantastic, and it feels really good. We want decent strength still because we have 2 charges. Getting some passive melee regeneration isn't a bad thing to have. On the more strength focused build, we're obviously going to push that strength as high as possible. These stats include the font mods that I showed, which can help you hit some of those higher tiers because we're taking a lot of penalties on those fragments. But as much strength as you can, decent discipline, decent recovery, and just try and do what you can with the rest of it. Briefly want to talk about the artifact mods. We have 4 here that I really want to focus on that are very stasis centric. Crystalline Converter is pretty solid because it'll generate more stasis shards, and as you collect those, it'll help you generate more crystals. Won't happen all the time, but it's a great boost. Our most important one is Hail the Storm because it boosts shatter damage, and it also sends out homing ice shards every time you shatter a stasis crystal, which is fantastic, and we do that all the time in this build. This is absolutely the one you want to boost the most, so to do that, this season would take a refined tonic of stasis crystallization that boosts crystalline converter and Hail the Storm. We can also do a potent tonic of stasis crystallization that just gets Hail the Storm. That's the blue one, but definitely recommend that. In our last column, we have Brain Freeze. Frozen enemies will have a slowing field around them, which is just extra good crowd control. And we also get a little bit more damage from the seasonal weapons. Lastly, we want the artifact mod Surf Cold, because it makes Stasis Shards also give us 10% class ability energy. And as we're doing dodges in both builds to get our melee back, that class energy is just extremely useful. So for weapons, I usually try and avoid recommending an exotic, absolutely, but this one's extremely good in this build, and it's Wicked Implement. This creates a stasis shard whenever you shatter a stasis crystal, which is fantastic. We make a lot of stasis crystals and we do a lot of shattering for damage, so making an extra stasis shard every time is great. And these stasis shards will track back to you. This weapon will also slow enemies if you get repeated critical hits on them, which can also lead up to a shatter. And then if you get the catalyst, this will also have headstones, so precision kills will make another stasis crystal, which really just keeps the loop going near infinitely. This is a great weapon. You can just get it from the exotic kiosk. There's no quest. There's no long drawn out thing. You do need Lightfall in order to get this though. So make sure you have the right expansions for it. But don't worry if you do not have it. We have some other good options. A Strategist Collective Action perked weapon is honestly your best thing because that'll restore your class ability energy. And this is for the close build. Bold Endings from the Pale Heart, that's the burst stasis hand cannon, can have this. Veiled Threat from last episode, and that's episode Echoes, is an auto rifle that can roll this as well. And both of those are craftable, which makes it really easy. You don't have to hunt for rolls, you just get your red borders, craft it, and you're good to go. If you're doing the range build, then you'd want to switch from Strategist to Pugilist, and you can get that on the weapon from Season of the Seraph, which is a pretty old one at this point. It's Disparity, it's a pulse rifle. Now you can get it from Operation Seraph Shield. A little bit grindy to get it, so I wish you luck with that, but you probably have some other good stasis weapons this season as well. So now I want to go through some gameplay clips just to kind of show you how this build works. The first clip here is of a Legend Lost sector. This is a 2030 power level activity. I was power level 2010 while doing it, so I'm 20 power level under. But you can see, even though I'm solo, it's very easy to manage. I have my melee back pretty quickly. I'm dodging pretty frequently. I'm near these strong enemies, and it's still working just fine. What this build really brings is just very strong crowd control. If you're fighting a single enemy that is capable of being crowd controlled, like these unstoppable champions, you can really just bully them eternally because they can't really fight back from you. He comes out of a freeze, and we just freeze him again. Shattering him out of a freeze stuns him again. He tries to move again, frozen once more. Can't really do anything about it, and we just kind of whittle him down. Don't pay attention to my awful aim here. But you can see we do take him down pretty effectively. But just because of the power delta, they have so much health here. One thing to mention is just anytime you see a stasis crystal, make sure you detonate it with your weapon if you're using Wicked Implement, because it will give you that free stasis shard, which just keeps your frost armor stacked up, keeps your melees coming back, and your class ability energy. You can see it really just stuns and staggers enemies every time you get one of those shatters. Wicked Implement here gives us the extra stasis crystal from Headstone. The Shielded Cabal, which are usually very annoying, very easy to freeze. You can see the entire group up there just exploded from a couple stasis crystals and just scattered everything. One guy's still flying through the air from a shatter. So that really demonstrates the close-up build. And once again, there's 20 power level under, and I'm still managing to be relatively close to enemies. Now for this other clip, I'm doing a Legend campaign mission that's called Breakneck. It's very good for testing out on groups of enemies. You can see these large crowds effects are just demolished. We're still using our dodge a little bit to get the melee back and just kind of keep those enemies when they get close to us. Always shattering crystals. You can see it's put a crystal right on the Cyclops' face so it can't shoot us, which is pretty awesome. The enemies tend to shoot these crystals when they don't when they're not able to see you, which is kind of great aggro management if you're playing solo or in small teams. And yeah, just keeping enemies frozen. You can really take your time a lot of the time, switching weapons, reloading, whatever you need to do. Just up here a little bit, we throw Stasis Shuriken out to just slow down one of those snipers and keep it locked in place. Shatter it to get rid of it. We're getting a little bit damaged here, so we throw out our grenade just for some extra cover. This build's really good, but as with all hard content, you still got to make sure you use cover. It's going to keep the enemies pretty well controlled and locked down, but you still want to just make sure that you're watching where they're coming from, making sure you're not leaving yourself open to too much fire at once. And you can see there's 4 Minotaurs here at once. We shatter one enemy, throw another crystal, shatter more. Once again, just freezing and shattering and freezing and shattering. I have my super here, try not to use it just to demonstrate. Shurikens do some pretty decent damage as you chunk things, but just briefly going over the gameplay loop, you want to throw your Shurikens into groups of enemies where possible. Really practice with shooting them from a long distance. They have a little bit of drop off. Shoot the crystals or hit them with another Shuriken if you have it. Dodge near enemies to gain a melee charge, no matter which build you're using, if you can. And then we're just going to try and pick up orbs for healing or for powering our build. And you just kind of repeat everything until dead. If you come up against the boss, you're going to have to play a little bit more cagey because you don't necessarily have quite as much damage with this build, but the consistent damage from the Stasis Shurikens will really help you. And with that, that's pretty much it for the video. Thank you for watching. I really appreciated all the support on the first video. I hope you guys liked this. Just a little bit of housekeeping. I'll have dim links and mobilytic links in the description. I will put timestamps in the description. I don't mind if you scroll through the video fast or if you need to come back and refer to it. I'll also have all the slides that I used for this video linked in the description, so you can go refer to them when you need to without having to watch the whole video or listen to me. Please comment with any questions. I love answering questions, so feel free to do that. My next video will be Icefall Mantle on Titan, Stasis Titan, not Prismatic, because I'm trying to keep it on Stasis theme for a little bit. So definitely like and subscribe if you're interested in that. Thank you. I'm Engineer.